So I'm Linda, and I'm the very simple. I'm here to show you a very small change that has still helped us solve a really big, what was becoming a really big problem. And before I go any further, I want to say very many thanks to Trevor Thornton, an applications developer in our Digital Library Initiatives Department, for suggesting and writing, excuse me, this plugin. So the problem we were having was that staff were accidentally deleting resource records. Not every day, but way more often than we want to have happen. And, you know, they would open the record, they would scroll down to the component that they wanted to delete, they would click on the delete button and watch their resource record disappear. Then, in a panic, they would call Trevor, who had to then, you know, try to restore the record. And of course, the first question that Trevor would ask was, didn't you get the confirmation? Didn't you have to confirm it? Well, yeah, but people were just reading right over that. You just clicked on delete, you knew what you were deleting, and so you just clicked yes. And it happened to everybody. I did it. And it happened with huge resource records that were, you know, it was becoming a really big problem. So now, though, when you want to delete something, you look at the delete button, and it tells you what you're going to delete. So if you're deleting the whole resource record, it says delete resource. Or if you're deleting just an archival object, that's what it says on the button. And of course, changing the text on the button doesn't stop anybody from deleting the resource record or whatever. And I can't really tell you why people are less likely to delete it when they see the text on the button rather than in the confirmation question that comes afterwards. But it is true that this problem has disappeared pretty much. I can't remember the last time somebody deleted a resource record accidentally. So you still do get the confirmation, and you still do say, yes, you want to delete it. But it really seems to be that first seeing it on the button that makes the difference. And so that's it. That's the story of a very successful little plugin. The code for the plugin is in GitHub, and it's public. And Trevor has also said if anybody is interested in talking to him about it, he's happy to do that.
Morning. My name is Karla Irwin, and I'm from UNLV. I'm going to talk about our Spawn plugin today, and if you have ArchivesSpace, you're likely familiar with the Spawn functionality that comes out of the box in ArchivesSpace, where you can sort of spawn an accession record and reuse that information to pre-populate a resource record. I want to disclose that I did not write the code for the plugin, but I did guide its development. The bulk of the work was done by Carlos Limas, who was our application programmer at the time, and currently Seth Schall is our application developer, and he does all the work to maintain the plugin with new releases. So just a brief bit of background, we began using ArchivesSpace in 2014. We are still only using the staff interface at this time. Prior to ArchivesSpace, we used a homegrown database to present information on all of our collections, and that database included our manuscript, photograph, university archives, and oral histories. The oral histories alone had over 3,000 individual records in that database, and the Spawn plugin was primarily created to deal with those records. One of our first steps of implementation was to gain some administrative control over our data. So we exported all that information from the homegrown database into a CSV file, mapped that CSV to the ArchivesSpace accession CSV, and then batch imported all of that information into accession records in ArchivesSpace. So the good news is there's a lot of data within our accessions module, but how could we most efficiently reuse that information when we are spawning our resource records? So one of our current goals in our use of ArchivesSpace is to ensure that all of our collection holdings are represented in our resource records. We are currently in progress on a backlog elimination project, and one of the goals of that project is to get all of our collection information in the resource record module by the end of June of next year. We are also preparing for a new digital asset management system that will host our digitized, born digital materials, and archival description for all of our collections. And without going into much detail, this new system will replace our current instance of Content DM, and the description in ArchivesSpace will be integrated into this new DAMS. Our homegrown database will be retired when the DAMS is launched in 2020. So with these deadlines in mind, and to expedite work on our finding aids, it's important that we can reuse that existing information from the accession record via the spawn feature while improving workflow efficiencies. To facilitate this work, particularly for all those oral history records, we decided to enhance the default spawn feature so we could spawn multiple resources at one time, auto-populate several required note fields, and ensure all of the applicable information in our accession records are spawned into the resource records. So here's a look at the default spawn fields in ArchivesSpace on one side that come out of the box, and how we customized the notes and fields in our plugin on the other side. I do want to note that subject and classification fields are spawned by default, but we did not add any subjects or classifications to our accession records, so that is something that we had to enhance. Our plugin allows the ability to select one subject term and one classification term to automate the addition of those when spawned. So we found that using these pre-populated fields really saves time over the long run, especially if you are looking over 3,000 oral history records. So here are the spawn settings in the plugin, which staff do have the ability to edit. You can enable and disable certain fields as needed. You can also change the pre-populated text for the accession and use notes, and edit the subject and classification link. I do want to note that with our plugin, you only have the ability to add one subject term with the spawn, so this is something we'd like to improve. Okay, so let's see if this works. Nope. Okay, here's the a little bit of a demo. So in the plugin, you just search for the accession records that you'd like to spawn into resource records. You can pick multiple records at one time. This is useful for us because we have sort of distinct oral history projects, and a lot of the information is the same, so we like to edit those simultaneously. So you select as many records as you want, and then once you're ready to go, you just click on them, and they'll each open up in a new window. So you do have to do that one at a time, which isn't as super fast as we like, but we still find it does speed things up. So once they're all opened up, you can see how all the fields are pre-populated, how there's a lot of notes pre-populate, and you just go in and edit and finish up your resource record and save. So just to close, we do have all our plugin code on GitHub. We have other plugins besides this one. I also co-wrote an article with my colleagues Cindy Shane, Carol O, and Carlos Limas, and you can read about that. And finally, my email is up there. I'm happy to answer questions, and Seth is also happy to answer any technical questions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Searcy, and I'm the accessioning archivist at NYU. So earlier this morning, my colleague Weatherly Stephen talked about the two plugins that I'm going to talk about today, specifically in the context of our off-siting workflows and our productivity. So I'm going to talk about those plugins a little bit more generally and also show you how they work. So before I begin, sorry, that color contrast is horrible. I can share this link with people afterwards. We have a libguide for our ArchivesSpace usage, and it has every link I'm going to share, all of our documentation. So we definitely want people to know about and use the things that we've created, and if it's useful to you, that is great for us. So the first plugin is our MARC export plugin. And we created this locally with one of our developers, and it modifies the ArchivesSpace MARC export to do three main things: to enforce our local content standard, to address some gaps in functionality, and also to extend the mapping to create item records for individual containers. So this facilitates loading MARC records into our ILS, which we are currently using Aleph, and OCLC connection, as well as just facilitating our offsiting workflows. So a few examples of what I mean by that. So for our local content standard, basically what we want our records to look like, what we want them to contain, what we don't want them to contain. So for example, we didn't want biographical historical notes or scope and content notes in our MARC record because of character limits, but we did want the abstracts. So the plugin suppresses specific notes so that they don't appear. And this is also really helpful in kind of solidifying the notion that ArchivesSpace is our system of record for what we know about our collections. The information about a collection lives in the resource record, and then from there we can export an EAD finding aid, which has a lot more information, and a container list, and then a MARC record, which might have different information, but it's all coming from the same source. It also addresses some gaps in the functionality, so subfield indicators or punctuation, dates, that kind of thing. But the most significant change that this plugin introduces is the creation of 863.949 field pairs for every top container that contains a barcode. That's more useful. So the 863 field acts as the basic bibliographic unit. So you can see it has the container indicator and a barcode. And then the 949 field becomes the item record in our ILS with a lot more information. So top container, the barcode, the item processing code, which helps us say, where it's living or where it's going, and then some other information about the collection. So Weatherly kind of showed you this morning, so this should be a refresher. So the plugin contains some logic that helps populate those specific codes for us. So it's looking at ArchivesSpace, the location for particular containers, and then assigning a specific code for it in that subfield S. So that helps us say either if it's currently at our offsite facility or if it's going to our offsite facility from one of two locations. Previously, we had been doing this manually, which was incredibly time-consuming and definitely prone to error. And you can also see that information, specifically the barcode, the item processing code, those are loaded directly into our ILS. So just to recap, it's really useful in that it limits the manual editing and cleanup that we have to do on these records post-export, and facilitates loading the records into both our ILS and OCLC, and facilitates large-scale workflows to send materials to our offsite facility. So the second plugin I'm going to talk about is the work order plugin, also referred to as the digitization work order plugin. We developed this with Hudson Malonglo, and it creates a TSV of descriptive metadata for selected components in a resource record. And this arose out of a historical specific need at NYU, where we had developed and very heavily used an Archivist Toolkit plugin to facilitate in-house reformatting and digitization workflows. So when we were migrating, we knew we needed something to replace it, but because these are interdepartmental workflows that we are only a part of, we don't manage, we needed something that was similar enough as to not disrupt them, but to make some modest improvements. It optionally creates a simple component unique identifier, CUID. And like I said, it's used in these workflows, but it's also very adaptable. So Weatherly earlier talked about using it to create item identifiers for artwork, but you could use it for, if you wanted a simple spreadsheet of lists in a collection to maybe give to a donor for reviewing restricted materials or exhibition, use your imagination. So this is just a little overview of how it fits into these other workflows that have kind of already existed, so we needed something that could plug into them. Sorry. Not sorry. Okay. Let's see if this video works. Oh. maybe not. Okay, that's okay. I had hoped to demo this with a recording, but I took some not as exciting screenshots in case that happened. So basically what you do is you navigate to the resource record that you want, and under that More tab, you go to Work Order Report. This opens up a simplified tree of all the components in your record. This is just a record with files directly under the collection, but if you had series, it's only going to open at first glance the series, and then you kind of have to open them up to get inside just to kind of make it easier to load initially. You then, oh, sorry, I didn't take a screenshot of that, but you use those checkboxes to select or deselect so that only the checked components are the ones that are included in the work order report. Excuse me. Then you select Download Work Order. You get a message here saying that creating a work order will auto-create and assign component unique IDs to archival objects in the work order that don't already have them. And then here's what your TSV looks like. So it's really just a simplified set of descriptive information about the components that you selected. It has URIs, and then it also has your newly created CUID, which is then automatically inserted into this field in ArchivesSpace. Oops, sorry. Okay. So we use those CIDs for file naming, and for that reformatting and digitization workflow. This is also often used in conjunction with a local script to create and post digital object records to the ArchivesSpace API, so that's the reason that the URIs are important in that spreadsheet. The plugin also includes the option to create the TSV without assigning CUIDs, so you may have seen there was a second button that just said Download Report. So you would get a very similar CSV, but without that last column. So if you just want the list without the identifiers, you can do that as well. So those are, again, just some other ideas of how you might want to use this. Again, sorry, color contrast. But you can also, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them or talk either here or throughout the conference, or if you want to send me an email, please do. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to start talking, but feel free to leave because I don't want to be responsible for standing between you and lunch. And this is like my favorite type of presentation to give, one that I did not know I was going to give, so I have no slides and I have no anxiety about it because I did no preparation. So this could be interesting. I'm also going to try and do a live demo, so we'll see what comes of it. I'm Lora Woodford. I'm junior developer for ArchivesSpace. In my capacity working on the application, obviously I have kind of a front row seats to some of the common problems people are seeing with their data or with the application. So one of those problems I've been noticing for a while is people have ended up with orphan records in their database. So these are records that don't have a parent record, as you might guess by the name. That can be totally normal, having an orphan record, like especially in the realm of subjects and agents. So say your workflow is that your tech services folks do agent control, like do authority control for you, and they will create a subject and an agent before you have a record to link it to. Like, it can be fine to have an orphan agent or an orphan subject if it's intended. If it's not intended, if something like that has come out of a sloppy migration or some edits directly to the database, bugs in the application, then these orphan records can be a problem. They can become hidden records to you. They can have a trickle-down effect of impacting your index, impacting your search results. All of these things, you might be familiar with some of them if you've experienced them. So I wanted to create an easier way without going directly into the database that you could identify and remedy some of these orphaned records. So this isn't even really ready for prime time yet. I just kind of finished it. So we'll see how it goes. So the first thing you need to do to install a plugin, if you've not installed one before, so this is the plugin's code in GitHub. I'm going to grab it, and this is going to become very interesting where I try to talk into the microphone because I believe strongly about talking into the microphone, but I also need to type. So if I change into my plugins directory, sorry, and I have copied that link, I'm going to clone it. Now if I open my text editor that has ArchivesSpace in it, I will see, you'll have to trust me. Oh, now there is an orphan finder, which is what this thing is called. Typing. So in my plugins directory, there's now this orphan finder job plugin that wasn't there before. All I have to do to enable it is find the load or line in my config that has plugins in it. Add it. Save it, which is actually really important and easy to forget to do. And then I'm going to start ArchivesSpace. This is where I have to vamp for a little bit while it starts. So I explain, there's a little bit of a README here that explains what the plugin does and explains these steps that we just followed. So that is the same step if you're doing any sort of plugin. Stop your ArchivesSpace if it's running. Put the code in the plugins directory, add it to your config, make sure you uncomment the line of the config. So by default, this would look like this. If it's like that, you're not going to have it take any effect on your application. All right, now we should be good. She's coming. I'm using a incognito window so you don't see all my email, which means that my saved logins aren't saved. So now, if we go under background job, you'll see a new listing for Orphan Finder job, which is this new plugin that I just installed. If we go to it, it should look very much like if you're used to running reports within ArchivesSpace, it's kind of using the same setup as reports. So say we want to find all of the orphaned persons in our database. There are 3 different options here. There's a test run, a review run, and an execute run. Handily, when you change the run type, it gives you a description of what that's going to do. The shorthand is test run is just going to show you a log screen of all the orphaned records, that kind of black screen with green text on it. Review run is going to give you a CSV that you can download if you want to do a longer term kind of data remediation cleanup process. You want a CSV, a spreadsheet, and you want to check, should this be orphaned? You can use that as a starting point. And then there's an execute run, which will actually delete things from your database. So I'm going to run a review run. Click that, click select, start it, and this should end up with a CSV at the end. It looks like any other background job that you've seen before. I have gamed the system. I know my database has orphans in it, so I know I will get results. I'm going to grab this file. Don't look at how cluttered my desktop is. And then if we open this up, here is a listing of kind of high-level information about what I think is close to 200 orphaned personal names. Yeah, like 210. So we can check this if we copy Mr. Zukovsky's name here and go into our instance of ArchivesSpace. We'll find the record. If we view him, we'll find that he doesn't have any linked records to him, but just good confirmation, yes, he is orphaned. There's nothing linked to him. So then if we go back to our background job, that's not going to work, typo. And we run it again, but this time we're going to do person names and do an execute run I tried to make this as bold as possible. Warning, this cannot be undone. It is deleting the records from our database. If you click Start Job, it's going to start ticking by. And here is it deleting. So the first line is Zukovsky. It's deleting the record. In theory, if my indexer is going at a good speed, if I try to refresh this, yep, he's gone. So the orphan record is deleted. So at present, I tried to incorporate the things that I've seen most people have problems with, like types of orphan records people have had problems with. So this includes archival objects, the different agent types, so personal, corporate, family, software, subjects, and instances. So all this is doing, if folks have done kind of data cleanup in the back end of their MySQL database before, the core of the plugin is just SQL queries that would look very familiar to you if you've done these before. But it gives you kind of a friendlier user interface. So here's our query. A friendlier user interface for somebody that's less comfortable with doing work directly in the database, that you can do it through the front end. So it also should be relatively simple to add new types of things to this. I just tried to do the kind of basic common denominator ones. Because this has some pretty scary implications, like you can delete thousands upon thousands of records. By default, the ability to run it is set only to like your top level repository managers. They won't, if you are not logged in as an admin, you're not even gonna see this orphan finder job. But again, that can all be tweaked within the body of the plugin. So that's what I've been working on, and hopefully it's of use to some people. It's existing right now. Like I said, if you want to test it against a copy of your database and give me feedback, that would be fabulous. But it's in our kind of ArchivesSpace plugins GitHub repository. So that's it.